Hey guys, Happy New Year! 2020 is finally gone and we're into 2021, which I'm excited about. I'm not sure about you, but I'm guessing you probably are. So today I wanted to do something with a bit of a New Year's theme and investigate how those teeny tiny bubbles get stuck in our champagne. Okay, the first thing you need to know is that we actually use yeast, tiny microorganisms, to make these bubbles, and they're bubbles of carbon dioxide, and that's what gives the fizziness or carbonation to these sparkling wines. Now, the yeast generate these bubbles during a specific step called secondary fermentation, which sort of begs the question, well, there must be a primary or a first step of fermentation. Let me just quickly touch on primary fermentation so that later we can compare it to secondary fermentation, where the carbon dioxide for those bubbles and fizziness is actually produced. So in primary fermentation, all we do is take our grape juice and we put it in this huge open tank and add yeast to it, usually Saccharomyces cerevisiae. And this yeast loves to eat up all the sugars in the grape juice, and it converts it into carbon dioxide and ethanol. So ethanol is the alcoholic component. It's what actually makes you tipsy, where the carbon dioxide in this step, because the tank is open to the air, the carbon dioxide just evaporates and leaves the liquid altogether. It goes into the air. So what we have at the end of primary fermentation is a mixture that is at about 11% ethanol. So the yeast have made a lot of alcohol, actually so much alcohol, they end up dying off. They can't live in those conditions, which means we have what's called a still wine, meaning it's wine, but it's not bubbly, right? Because all the carbon dioxide left to the air. Now we're ready for that secondary fermentation. Remember, that's the step where the magic happens and we trap those bubbles in the champagne bottle. So before we start this second step of fermentation, we take our champagne bottles, we add the wine, some new yeast. Remember, the old yeast actually got killed in the last fermentation. So new yeast and some more sugars for them to munch on. So what's important here is we then cork and put a wire cage over the bottle, which means the bottle's sealed, good to go. So again, during this step, the yeast is going to produce ethanol and carbon dioxide. But what's different is the carbon dioxide can't escape, right? It's in a sealed bottle. So this is the carbon dioxide that leads to those bubbles when we pop a bottle of champagne. At this point, only a small percent of the carbon dioxide would be seen as bubbles or in the gas state. What happens here is most of the carbon dioxide is a liquid and it's just dissolved in the rest of the wine. And that's because the pressure within that bottle is growing to be quite large. Now, what I mean when I say the bottle's under high pressure is, remember, the bottle's corked. So as the yeast produces more and more carbon dioxide, the pressure within inside that bottle is getting higher and higher. And at the end of secondary fermentation, each bottle of champagne, the cork is holding in about 6 atmospheres of pressure, and that's equivalent if you dove underwater, if you went 50 meters down. So this cork is holding in a lot of pressure, and we actually hear this high pressure being released. That's what's happening when you uncork a champagne bottle and you hear that pop. That's letting you know you just released a bunch of pressure from that champagne bottle. And that high pressure is what makes that cork just, shoot off across the room. So we hear that pressure being released. And what this triggers within the champagne is as the pressure is lowered, that carbon dioxide that was in the liquid phase can now convert to the gas phase. And that's how we get those tiny bubbles rising out of our champagne as we pour it. So it's really this change in pressure from high pressure in the champagne bottle. You release it when you uncork it, is what makes those carbon dioxide bubbles possible. So the next time you crack open a bottle of champagne, get ready to amaze everyone with how champagne got its bubbles in the first place. Happy New Year, and talk to you next time. If you've made it this far, please hit that red subscribe button. It's free. Subscribing just means you get notifications of when I post my next video, and please give this video a thumbs up.